My name is Stephanie Peterson. I recognized that I was slowly awakening from what must have been sleep. I felt terrible, horrendous pain all over my body, but especially in my chest and arms. I tried to open my eyes, but they would not open. I heard footsteps approaching from my right, and then someone was stood beside me, fumbling with something. I could hear a steady beep, beep, beep. It seemed oddly familiar. Then I felt fingers stroking my hair. A beautiful voice said my name. The voice was vaguely familiar, but only recently so. It was a woman's voice, and she said my name with a heavy Mexican accent. She asked if I could open my eyes. I tried again. This time my eyes obeyed, but there was bright light, and I closed them tightly because the light hurt them. The woman beside me was still stroking my hair, and I heard her say, "Do you remember me?" Although I couldn't say how I knew her, I tried to say the name, which came immediately into my mind, Maria. The name came out in a croaking whisper, and I began coughing ferociously. At the same time, my eyes popped open long enough to see hands in front of me holding a paper towel. Maria told me to spit, and I did. I wondered why there was all this mucus in my throat, and why my throat hurt so badly. The coughing was very painful in my chest. Maria threw the paper towel in the waste bin and told me not to move, that I was hooked to a machine. She said she would be back with the doctor shortly. I watched her leave, trying to adjust my eyes to the light, and I was vaguely aware of another figure standing in the doorway, facing me. Squinting, I began to look around the room. I could just barely make out my surroundings, as I was almost legally blind without my glasses. I was in a hospital bed, propped up with pillows or something holding my contorted body in place. I could make out a very large window looking not out onto the outdoors, but into another area, with a very large desk or other partition, and many hospital personnel scattering about it. There were voices everywhere, lots of beeping sounds, almost everything seeming to be at a distance. To my left was a tall metal cabinet, like a locker. It seemed very relevant to something somehow. I closed my eyes, listening to the steady beeping sound coming directly from my right. Suddenly I realized why the beeping in the cabinet were very familiar to me, and I saw in my mind what could only have been a dream, or so I thought at the moment of recall. It went like this. I was lying on my stomach, perfectly comfortable, up high on what felt like a metal cabinet, my elbows on the cabinet beneath me, my chin resting on my hands. My body felt so light that I knew that if I fell off my high perch, I might simply float in midair. My vision was extremely clear even though I was not wearing my glasses. This discrepancy didn't seem to matter. I was looking down on my own sleeping body in the bed below. Perhaps I was at home. I must have been. But where there should have been my green sheets and red plaid coverlet, there were simple white sheets. Also, there was no tall metal cabinet in my bedroom at home. That too didn't seem to matter at all. I could hear very, very vividly, through both ears. Although in reality I have hearing loss in the right ear. Again, this didn't seem to matter. The beep, beep, beep sound, which was growing faster, plus another sound. This sound was like a steady whoosh, thunk over and over. I was just below the ceiling, and my toes behind me were just brushing the ceiling. I was moving my legs to brush my toes against it. I was not at home, but didn't really care where I was. I did not question this in the least. I simply observed without curiosity. I noticed how my body was crumpled up in a fetal position, lying on my back below me, propped up with cushions I couldn't see, as they were under the sheet. I noticed a tube coming out of my mouth. I was listening dispassionately to the whoosh thunk, which remained steady as the beep beeps, which had been quickening, became a steady beep. Suddenly the room exploded with activity. People came rushing in, and there was a lot of chatter. A man called out, "Maria!" and a woman answered, "I'm here!" as she ran into the room. People moved the bed. I noticed then that the tube coming out of my mouth was no longer there. For whatever reason, this didn't concern me. I wasn't confused. I wasn't excited in any way. There was just total acceptance of all the discrepancies, dispassionate observing from above. My view of the body on the bed was being partially obstructed now, but I saw my head being bent back and something metal in my mouth. I distinctly heard a word amongst all the chaotic chatter. That word, which I had never heard before, was aspirated. It didn't concern me at all that I didn't know the meaning. I saw some sort of machine being wheeled into the room. I saw a man rub two oblong shiny things together. The people around the body moved slightly back, and I got a better view as someone yelled, and then it became quiet. I heard a sort of buzzing sound over the whoosh, thunk, and the beep. Then the shiny things were placed on the chest of the body on the bed, and it arched upward. This repeated until the steady beep became separate beeps again. I noticed the tube was back in my mouth, the metal thing that had been there before gone. After a time, I have no idea how long, the people were becoming calmer, and as some of them began to leave, I floated fluidly from my perch atop the cabinet down to the bed. I simply moved without questioning why. As I lay back into my body, my awareness began to fade. That was the end of the dream. I had closed my eyes as I was recalling the experience. I was very, very confused. I started when I heard a male voice near me introducing himself. Doctor something. I don't recall his name. The doctor told me I was in Mission Hospital and had been in a coma. He looked at my eyes with a flashlight. It was impossible to focus my vision without my glasses. It then occurred to me. I had seen perfectly well without glasses in the dream. The doctor and Maria talked, but I wasn't really listening. I was trying to make sense of the dream. The doctor was leaving now, and Maria was at the door. I called her name. She came to me. I said I needed to pee. She said she had to remove the tube from me. She removed it. It went to a bag attached to the bed to catch my urine. I watched as she disconnected the wires, which went from my chest to a machine by the bed from the machine. She pulled a bag from off a pole at the head of the bed, which I realized was connected by a long line to a needle in my arm. She brought me a wheelchair, and I held the wires while she held the fluid bag as she helped me to the bathroom. When I was back in bed, and the wires reconnected to the machine and the bag back in place, she told me I was such a beautiful young lady. She told me how lucky I was to be alive. She said they had lost me 3 times in the ambulance, that the emergency medical technicians had told her so. The paddles had been used 3 times. I had no idea what paddles were. Upon the emergency medical technician's arrival, I had been breathing weakly on my own, she related, but not for long. They had a terrible time getting a vein, Maria said, and had to beat my arms. I suddenly had a real-time vision of being on my knees in a swirling sea of black. I didn't know what it meant until Maria happened to tell me of my ordeal several days before, that my stomach had been pumped of the 20 or more Vicodin I had taken. I had been taking the Vicodin for severe pain ever since my 1995 car accident. I had taken them all because I could no longer take the pain. Following the pumping, charcoal had been pumped into my stomach, and then I vomited, then more charcoal, more vomiting. Maria said that we almost lost you again first thing when she arrived yesterday morning, and that I had had to be intubated. I know now this is the word, but at the time I heard incubated, again. I didn't know what that was, and was too confused to ask any questions. I left the hospital very worried about what I now knew was no dream. It's how I knew Maria's name, and how I knew that I had been breathing with the help of a machine, why my throat hurt, why I immediately recognized the tall metal cabinet. When I finally examined my chest and arms, they were as black as coal, bruised beyond anything I had ever seen. I would be diagnosed 4 years later with severe fibromyalgia, and would grow to accept that I would need very, very strong painkillers, much stronger than Vicodin, for the rest of my life. And even then, the pain, though duller, is always present. I also learned only recently from a friend who is a former nurse what a defibrillator is, what it does, and how. She also told me about the heart monitor and its beeping, and what a flat line is, and what the words aspirated and intubated mean. After all the questions, she urged me to tell her more, and I told my story for the first time. She said I probably had a near-death experience, to look up some information on this, which led me to this website. I see similarities with other stories. Watch this near-death experience next about a woman who met lightful beings but suddenly pulled away by a voice you wouldn't expect.